power and command connections between the ground systems and the rocket until Falcon Heavy switches to internal power.
Back retract has started.
And in the next few seconds, we're going to start to see those arms coming open. And once they start that process, it's going to take about 15 seconds for them to fully open. And then once they're out of the way, the strong back is free to recline away from the vehicle a couple of degrees and then give it room for liftoff. You can see them start to open now. And now that those clamp arms are fully open, the rocket is fully free at the top. We should start to see that strong back.
NY, LOX load complete.
There's a good call out that one of the side boosters is now complete with its LOX load. So it is fully loaded with all of its propellants. And if you look at the strong back on the right,
LOX load complete.
We're now fully loaded with LOX on the other side booster now. You can see that strong back has moved back a little bit. And as we mentioned earlier, this is our first Falcon Heavy flight since 2024, and a lot is going to happen in the first 4 minutes of flight. First, we'll light the two side boosters, followed by the center core. Then, about 40 seconds after liftoff, we'll decrease power on the two side boosters in preparation for max Q. At about 2.5 minutes into flight, the side boosters will shut down during the booster engine cutoff, or BECO, and the boosters will separate. Once clear of the side boosters, the center core will throttle up once again until the center core shuts down with main engine cutoff, or MECO. Meanwhile, the side boosters
Center core, LOX load complete.
And there we just heard the call out that the center core liquid oxygen loading is complete. So at this point in time, both side boosters and the center core are now fully loaded with liquid oxygen and RP1. We're still loading liquid oxygen on the second stage, and that should conclude at the T-minus 2 minute mark, which will also conclude all propellant loading for Falcon Heavy.
We're coming up on about 10 seconds away from wrapping up that last propellant load milestone.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
Right on time. So with that, Falcon Heavy is now fully loaded with nearly 3 million pounds of propellant. Coming up next in the launch countdown will be ground gas closeouts. It's about 20 seconds from now. Looking ahead a little bit, at the T-minus 1 minute mark, Falcon Heavy will enter startup, and the onboard flight computers will take over the launch countdown.
Ground gas closeouts.
You may be able to hear and certainly see an increase in white cloud venting, and this comes from venting down the TE liquid oxygen fill line. Now we're heading towards that T-minus 1 minute mark, at which point Falcon Heavy will enter startup.
Falcon Heavy is in startup.
Stages 1 and 2 will now begin to pressurize for launch.
Launch director, go for launch.
At T-minus 40 seconds, all systems are go for launch. Let's listen in to the final seconds of the countdown.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Go Falcon Heavy, go Viasat.
M1D, chamber pressures are nominal.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
At T plus 30 seconds into flight, Falcon Heavy has successfully lifted off from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center. We're now throttling down the engines to prepare for max Q, which is the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure during ascent. Max Q occurs when the combination of speed and air pressure puts the greatest stress on the vehicle.
Falcon Heavy is supersonic.
And there we just heard the call out that the vehicle is now traveling faster than the speed of sound. Max Q coming up in a few seconds.
Max Q.
Now we've passed the moment of peak mechanical stress on the rocket, and M1D engines are throttling back up.
Now we have several events coming up and a few more than we're accustomed to with Falcon 9 missions, so let's get into it. First will be BECO, or booster engine cutoff, when the engines on the two side boosters shut down. After that, the side boosters will separate from the center core and perform a flip maneuver using their small thrusters to head back towards Earth. Next, the side boosters will initiate boost back burn to send the vehicles towards landing zones 2 and 40. After that is main engine cutoff, or MECO, when all the engines on the center core shut down, and that will be followed by stage separation, where the center core and second stage are pushed apart. A few seconds later, we'll see that second stage MVAC ignite to continue to carry the payload to orbit, and finally, once in space, the fairings will be deployed from stage 2. And we're about 15 seconds away from the start of that sequence of events. First, again, we're looking out for BECO, side booster separation, booster flip, and boost back burn startup.
Booster engine cut off.
Side booster separation confirmed.
And that's chill.
NY and PY boost back startup.
Great news. At this point, both Falcon Heavy side boosters are performing the boost back burn. And this is the first of 3 burns that each side booster will undergo on the way back to Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. The primary objective of this burn, the boost back, is to quickly reorient the side boosters onto the required return trajectories. And that's particularly important in the event of a return to launch site like today, as opposed to a drone ship ocean recovery. These boosters are heading towards landing zones 2 and 40. Meanwhile, on the center core, the 9 M1D engines are continuing to power Falcon Heavy on its nominal trajectory and throttled back up following booster separation. We're about 20 seconds away from boost back burn shutdown, at which point the boosters will continue to coast until they restart for entry burn. Coming up next, we're standing by for the boost back burn shutdown, which will be followed by main engine cutoff on the center core, stage separation, and second engine start 1 of the MVAC engine.
NY and PY boost back shutdown.
Main engine cut off.
Stage separation confirmed.
And that's chill.
Fantastic news and a great view there on your screen following stage separation, and we're now looking out for fairing separation.
All vehicles are following a nominal trajectory.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Great view there of the fairing in the background, and after those action-packed few minutes, we had 2 side boosters separate, perform their flip maneuvers after engine shutdown, followed by a complete boost back burn. The center core had its own engine cutoff right before it separated from stage 2, and that was followed by the first engine start on the second stage, as well as a successful fairing separation.
Now, the next major milestone coming up is entry burn on our 2 side boosters, scheduled to occur just after the T plus 6 minute and 30 second mark. The entry burn is used to slow the first stage boosters as they head back towards landing zone 40 and landing zone 2. Now, we're currently in our first MVAC burn, and this burn should last for another few minutes. The next milestone will be the first stage entry burn, coming up in about 2 minutes. Today, Falcon Heavy side boosters will be performing 2 burns in order to land. The first burn, known as the entry burn, slows the vehicle down before hitting the denser parts of Earth's atmosphere.
Without this entry burn, we'd only be using atmospheric drag to slow down Falcon Heavy's side boosters, which would add extra stress to the vehicle.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Following the entry burn, the boosters will initiate a landing burn to slow down even more for a precise touchdown. When Falcon Heavy's side boosters fire up their center M1D engines for re-entry, the vehicles will be flying through Merlin's exhaust gases, also known as the rocket's plume, and that process deposits a layer of soot on the vehicle's surface. The soot actually comes from the carbon-based fuel, RP1, that Falcon Heavy uses, and with each flight, that layer builds up a little bit more on the outside of the vehicle.
Now, in about 20 seconds, those side boosters will execute the entry burn, followed by the landing burn. Both burns are meant to slow the side boosters down rapidly before landing. At the time of separation, the side boosters were traveling slow enough to turn around and make their way back to land at our landing pads. So we're expecting entry burn in a few seconds.
NYPY entry burn startup.
And there's the call out for the entry burn startup for the Falcon Heavy side boosters. This burn is set to last about 15 seconds and again is slowing those vehicles down in preparation for their final burn and landing.
NYPY entry burn shutdown.
And that concludes our entry burn. As mentioned earlier, we will be attempting to recover both side boosters, which are targeting landings at landing zone.
All vehicles continue to follow nominal trajectories.
Great news there. We're targeting landings at landing zones 2 and 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And you can continue to follow along with the upcoming landing burn with the engine graphics at the bottom of your screen.
FTS is saved.
Landing burn is coming up in about 20 seconds.
FTS is saved.
Meanwhile, you can see on stage 2 that first burn of the MVAC engine is still underway. Viasat 3 Flight 3 is on its way to orbit.
NYPY transonic.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Expecting that landing burn startup in just a couple seconds. Landing burn has started up. This is the final burn before the boosters will touch down.
NY landing light deployed.
The Falcons have landed. As you saw, we had successful landing of Falcon Heavy side boosters. If you were in the vicinity, then you definitely heard those sonic booms on their way down. Now,
shut down.
We just heard the successful cutoff of our second stage engine, and we are waiting for confirmation of good orbit.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And there was the call out. Now, we have a bit of a breather coming up before the next milestone for the mission, which is SES-2, when the MVAC engine on the second stage restarts as it continues to its orbital destination. That's going to come up at the T plus 26 minute mark, so we're going to take a break and leave you with some fantastic views. So see you back here in about 15 minutes.